Oh, no. Oh, there's been huge improvement just in this.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm Allie. I'm here with Becky, and we're continuing on with our small digestible bites of learning under the context of informational writing. Today's session is a short session focused on collaborative engagement. And if you remember from the last session under resources, we talked about this collaborative engagement component as part of the writing app, follows the demonstration part of your writing lesson. And so for today, because this part is so important, we want to focus on how to have collaborative engagement as a teacher, as you work with students, and also with students conferring with each other, with their peers. So I'm going to turn things over to Becky, and we are going to get started.
Collaborative engagement is not something that we've traditionally ensured was a part of our sequence in instruction. And so today, we're going to look deeply into what Owocki defines as collaborative engagement. It is one of the structures that is in every chapter in her book. So no matter what anchor it is, she's going to have a stage in that anchor that is always going to be about collaborative engagement. So let's see what she says about it, okay? What do you know about collaborative engagement? Certainly, we've learned that you don't start teaching writing strategy or behavior with collaborative engagement. It always starts with the demonstration. That's her definition of the first step of delivery. Some people call that step the focus lesson, and I kind of like that term actually, because it focuses the children and actually the teacher in three different ways. Number one, it's the naming and the definition of a writing behavior or a writing strategy. So it's the explicit definition of it. It gives the purpose of that definition, how it's going to help you as a writer. And thirdly, it's the modeling of that behavior or strategy in action so students see it working. Focus lesson is the term that Fisher and Frey use in their instructional model. This is the instructional model of gradual release. You've seen this before. We repeat this because this is the critical framework that all instruction, whether it's math, science, social studies, writing workshop, readers workshop, it all is going to transfer instruction to learning through this instructional model. So we see that the focus lesson and the guided instruction where teachers are working in smaller groups around needs of particular groups of children in the instruction are the first two parts, and basically the teacher has the responsibility in those stages. Collaborative engagement, though, is the beginning of release to the students, where they are doing the work. Now the role of the teacher is to stand back and to watch who knows what misconceptions are out there that I need to reteach, and creating scaffolds and supports that we slip in more. And then eventually, after collaborative engagement, we see that students are able to produce and apply independently better. So Owocki says basically, and we're looking on page 64 to 66, that collaborative engagement only really talks about two things. Analyzing and evaluating writing. That could be student writing, that could be mentor text, professional writing, and conferencing. That can be conferencing with teacher or conferencing with peers. That's all it is. If we look at the analyzing and evaluating, we start with student writing, for example. We know that we've already, in our focus lesson and in guided instruction, we've taught the elements of informational text type. The collaborative learning stage is where we take a sample of student writing, we put kids in groups, and they now are working together to look at that writing and to analyze it in light of the criteria of informational text type writing that you have taught them. Things like, what does the author teach about this topic? Do you have any questions? How does the author introduce the topic? How does he hook the reader? The use of illustrations, what do they teach? What details could be added as you look at illustrations in other media? How well is the topic developed? Do you still have questions beyond the facts, the definitions, and the details? So as kids are working in these small groups, you're going to be looking for writing samples, and there are a number of places now that you can find these. The one that I've selected here is actually from achieve.core, and you are going to want to go on here because they will have writing samples organized by text type, and then within each text type, they're going to have student writing samples by grade level, and they'll show you 4 different copies. One is the original copy that the student wrote with spelling errors and you know, it's a pretty sloppy draft. But then they change it into, you know, conventional so that you can really use this with kids in small groups to look at the criteria for informational text types. And it even gives you an answer sheet, like identifying where in the writing did the author introduce, where in the writing did they develop. So it's kind of like your cheat sheet, your answer. And you can give this to kids at the end of their analysis and evaluation so that they can be independent as well. We know Owocki on page 64 gives you the questions for analyzing and evaluating texts. Allie has provided on the hub those same questions now turned into question cards so that for each small group, you can have that set of cards right in the middle of that table so that they have the criteria that they need to evaluate the writing. The second evaluating and analyzing of text is looking at professional authors. We know a very important force in children's development as writers is looking at texts created by professional authors. They're going to be looking at the same criteria that we used, the criteria for informational text writing, but this time you're going to be looking at professional authors. These mentor texts are they're the strong models you want students to emulate and imitate. And we know there are beautiful informational mentor texts out there. So that first part of collaborative engagement then is about analyzing and evaluating writing, be it student writing or mentor texts. And we do this dance between looking at student writing and mentor text because we know that students will work to match the model as they analyze and evaluate their writing in relation to the model of professional authors. This is all about teaching students to improve their own writing and the writing of their peers. So the first step of collaborative engagement is analyzing and evaluating writing samples, writing. We also are in process now of developing rubrics around the text types. And you can see this is Writing Anchor number 2, and it's a rubric for 3rd grade. Kathy Draper and her team over at Lake Agassiz last year began looking at the creation of these text type rubrics and creating categories. She took this is for 3rd grade, so this is the 3rd grade expectation that we want kids all to know. And just by looking at the other grade levels, say for example, in looking at facts, you've hit the target. You've made the rubric when the child can develop the topic with several facts. But as a child looks across here in terms of the use of facts in his writing, he might say, you know, really, I just have a few facts. But the use of this rubric would tell him, oh, if I have several facts, I'm going to go from a 2 to a 3. So these rubrics help the student to see how they can explicitly improve various areas of their informational writing.
These rubrics will also be a nice guide for teachers in our district to help align what is expected, and then also to help you as a teacher know what is it next that I can conference with that student about. What focus, what small piece of information can I draw from their writing and build upon when I'm conferring with that student. So these are exciting pieces that are in progress. Once again, our Literacy Hub is the holding site for all of the pieces that we develop, and so we'll let you know when that's been added, but that will be the place where those will go.
So the second part of collaborative engagement, as Owocki defines it, is conferencing. So we know conferences are important to all students, and we are certainly familiar with teacher conferences and with peer conferences. Page 64 to 66 is where you're going to find this information. Let's talk first about teacher conferencing. It's the place that you listen to these students talk, and you can help them to articulate their topics and ideas. You are able to do a quick follow-up to see how they're following the model of your mentor text or not following it. And it might also be a time where you have to reteach a specific strategy. They didn't get it when you showed the model in a mentor text, and you're going to specifically teach it again. So this is a really critical opportunity for the teacher. You know, it's Owocki says that it's very tempting to help students create flawless pieces when you're conferencing with them, but the general rule of thumb is to keep the teaching on the writer, not on perfecting the piece. And so generally, she says it's more beneficial to focus on one key concept or strategy that the student can carefully consider and actually internalize. So, keeping in mind that your goal is to teach the writer rather than to perfect the piece, she says there's only 4 basic steps to any teacher conference routine. You're going to open the conversation. You're going to identify notable strengths. You're going to teach one teaching point, and then you're going to send the student away with something manageable to develop. Okay? Now, her conference routine is going to be the same 4 steps if you're teaching Anchor 1, if you're teaching Anchor 7, if you're teaching Anchor 9. It's the same routine. So, but she says to be very careful. You have to know what anchor you're focusing on. So here in Anchor 2, she says to have the predictable set of prompts and questions ready to go will help students know what to expect and to be ready to show their thinking. So this chart serves as a guide for your conference with all students around Anchor 2. So when you're looking at noticeable strengths, you want to be identifying them according to the criteria of Anchor 2. So you're going to say things like, oh, this part of your drawing helps me to learn about the topic because, you know, you created the detail, or whatever. Your introduction draws me in because, and then you're going to cite exactly in their writing how that helped you. Or your topic is well developed because, oh, here you use facts, there's definitions, there's quotations and examples. These are the beautiful questions and prompts that you don't have to search for. She's got them all outlined for you around every one of the anchors.
What I love about this grid is that it reminds us about the language we use with children. The prompts that we use with kids matter, and the prompts and the language that we use with kids elicits a certain response. And so when I see these prompts, I think it'll help us as a district align what we're asking kids to do. It'll help us align our language that we use with children, which is so important. Lori Young is actually working on creating this grid, and it'll be on our Literacy Hub once again, so that we can reprint it in cardstock and laminate it if you choose, so it can be right there for you when you are conferencing with the student. Those prompts can be right there at your fingertips and something that you use with kids.
I know on professional teacher training videos that we see of teacher conferencing, you'll see teachers with a ring, and it's all the various prompts and questions that go with specific things that they're teaching. They have it right there, so they're using that consistent language that you're talking about, because these teacher conferences are really critical in helping kids to know what to expect and to already be thinking. They know you're going to ask the same types of questions, and so they're ready for you.
And it certainly brings back the prior PD sessions that we've had, where we talk about the language we use, the importance of conversation, talking out loud. All of those pieces are certainly you know, a part of this teacher conference routine.
Mm-hmm. Purposeful talk, purposeful teacher talk, purposeful student talk. Well, Ellie, we know the questions and prompts will change with the standards, although these steps remain the same. Are we going to find this form on the hub for every one of our anchors?
Yes, that is the goal, that we will develop the teacher conference prompts that are specific to the criteria.
Yeah, I just want to be sure of that. So conferencing starts with the teacher. Okay, then it moves to peer conferencing. And we know that after students have had experience conferring with that teacher, now all you have to do is coach them with the peer conference. Your conference gives them a starting expectation for their conversations when they're with their peers. So on page 66, you'll also see the peer conference plans. So these are the peer conference plans for Anchor 2. I love these tasks. So you're working with a buddy. Okay, you're going to ask the author to read the piece with you and tell you about one part that teaches something important. And then you reverse the role and you tell the author about one part that you think teaches something important. Or how about this one? You're going to ask the author to tell more details about one part of the picture or the writing, and then you're going to help them with specific ideas to get them started on adding those details. Or this one, together, you look at the informational writing checklist and find all the parts. Are they present? And these tasks outline the choices, and sometimes you may even guide them to a specific task that you want them to do in their peer conferences. But the beautiful thing is that you are assured that they are going to be conferring about the informational text type that you just taught.
One of the pieces about peer conferencing that I took away, especially when I was looking at page 66 of Owocki and that grid of what you want peers to do with each other, is how deliberate and planned these interactions need to be with kids, and how our modeling and how our structure, we need to teach that. We need to teach that well, so that children can be conferencing with each other well. And so that this checklist and the guides that Owocki gives us on page 66 certainly helps us to know where to focus and how to set our students up for success when they conference with each other.
You know, you're talking about conferencing, teacher conferencing, student conferencing that's very planned and deliberate, even right back to the planning with the mentor text. This is far more deliberate than I've ever done. We're moving into a new era, but it sharpens exactly and clearly what we're to be teaching for kids. So we see in collaborative engagement, really there's only two things that you're working on. You're analyzing and evaluating student writing and mentor texts, and you're conferring with teacher and peers. All of collaborative engagement is done to help the student know how to improve their writing. You can see in this gradual release, can't you, how supported the learning is and the potential for improved learning that we now have, where it's explicit definition and instruction of the strategy, its purpose, and how it works. Here in guided, the teacher is reteaching to small groups what they have misinterpreted or what they're missing. It's again another shot And then the third step of the kids being able to do this, how do they do it on their own, or how don't they do it? That I need to, again, be able to respond and scaffold for their support so that they are better able, in the end, to apply and be able to perform independently on their own. So what we're seeing really, everything is organized around this instructional framework of gradual release. Like we were talking earlier, we can use this to teach math, we can use it to teach science, but right now in Owocki, we're using gradual release to teach the writing process. And so today what we've deeply considered is a look at collaborative learning in this gradual release instructional model. We know, however, that it starts out with the teacher model, the focus lesson at the top, where she is modeling and defining and demonstrating strategies and behaviors. We know that we help to scaffold for student success because these are the pieces, the resources that they need to independently improve and produce. But first of all, we want to give them that deeper focus on collaboration so that eventually we're going to see better products.
When I look at these images as we wrap up, you know, really those images are snapshots of what we hope to be seeing in classrooms right now. Teachers demonstrating, you know, students using checklists for their interaction and teachers using that in their small group instruction. We hope to see peers interacting with each other with the ultimate goal, of course, of students being independent. So these are glimpses of what we are already seeing in our district with the hard work that you're doing with Owocki, and you're planning and applying this in your classrooms, and then hope to see this just a part of our district in every way, whether it's teaching writing as we're focusing on today or in the other content areas. Thank you for your time with us today. We will finish with that, and we will see you soon with our next session.